Hello and welcome once again to the show where we talk about DC Universe Online, DC TV, and DC Comics. This is DCU Tonight, and I am your host, Rock Var. Thank you again for joining us this week. The second time this week, well, no, it's the first time this week. The first time this week as we go over all the DC TV that's happened. It's been a huge week in DC TV. Lots to talk about. We had Gotham, Flash, and Supergirl. We're going to discuss all that tonight. Then we're going to head on over to DC Comics this week, and then we'll send you on your merry ways. I've got Arrow to catch up on tonight. I haven't watched Arrow yet, so we'll talk about Arrow and Legends of Tomorrow in the Friday night edition of the show, which should be happening. Although I do have big plans, I've got to be up and about early Saturday because I've got to get to the movie theater to watch Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, which premieres, I think, Friday, actually. I'm sure that there's a lot of, if you're in an area where you've got a movie theater that's cool and does midnight showings, you've probably got a Thursday midnight showing to catch. But me, I prefer matinees. I don't like going when there's a huge crowd. I was first in line at the theater that I went to. I got one of the, I don't know if you guys remember, but back when, like it was a long time ago, Man of Steel. When Man of Steel came out, Walmart did an exclusive deal where if you bought tickets through them, there'd be a special showing for just a small, whatever group of people bought those. And so we went to that for Man of Steel, and I don't know. I don't enjoy watching movies with a packed house as much. I like to kind of get involved and just zone out into the movie, and I can't do that if there's people making noise and kids screaming and cell phone lights coming on and whatever. So someday I'll have my own private theater and I won't, because if I did, I would invite everyone to it, so then it wouldn't be private anymore. But anyway, in the world of DCUO, which is the main topic normally of this program, we have got several things happening. The big thing that's on the horizon right now is, we're going to get rid of this combat differential, and we're going to go back to having skill points matter. And I know that that's killing people in, PvP right now because the change hasn't been made, and it's not the most enjoyable thing for them, I'm sure. But hang tight because change is on the way, and they are going to be fixing those issues and setting things back to the point where you feel like you've achieved something by gaining skill points. But no word yet on when that goes into place. I've got to still keep track of that, and I'll keep you guys posted as much as I can. But DC Universe Online will definitely get that information out there on their Twitter feed or on the website whenever they get closer to doing it. But it is on the horizon. Other news in DC Universe Online that we've covered this week, we do have these lovely emblems now from the Batman v Superman movie. You can check those out on DC Universe Online's official YouTube page. They've got a video up on the ones that they released. I've got one on Var Nation that I did, and you can see all the different emblems. There are 3 that I didn't cover, which are the worn ones. And what it is it just looks like the emblem's been scratched up or worn down. So that you can find out. Also, you can see behind me the Batman v Superman posters that came in the swag bags. Those available on the broker at DC Universe Online right now as well. So if you're playing the game, you can purchase those. But outside of that, not a whole lot that I can report right now. I have not seen. I know we had the PvP tournament last Saturday, or Saturday, the most recent Saturday, but I don't know who. I haven't seen any announcement of who won that or what the placings were. So I'll look that up and we'll try to report that as well. I really want to announce those because I'll bet that was fun. I did not get to attend, but I'm interested to find out which side won, Batman or Superman. I think it's over. But speaking of Batman v Superman, if you go to YouTube right now and you look up, there are several interviews on there with the cast, including just one with Ben Affleck. There's one that talks with each one individually. If you ever had a doubt about Henry Cavill, which I've liked Cavill since the beginning. It's not him that I have a problem with. I think he does a great job. But if you ever had a problem with Henry Cavill, look up these videos, and I'll post links to them on our Twitter account, @var_nation. This interview with Henry Cavill just almost made me cry how much he loves the character, how deeply he feels for this character. So watch it for yourself. I don't want to tell you anything about it because it might ruin the moment, but I'll post links to those. Again, if you're not following us on Twitter, it's @var_nation, and that's a good way to find out, number one, when we're doing the show, and number two, these different things. I'll go on YouTube and find some, different videos that I think pertain to the DC universe, and I'll tweet those out as well, the links, so you can see them. But that said, we have got 3 episodes to talk about tonight, and it'll be fairly brief. I'm not going to go into huge detail on all of them because then we'll have like a 3-hour show, but we'll start with Supergirl, even though Gotham aired at the same time. I'm going to talk about Flash in between Supergirl and Gotham. But Supergirl this week, as usual, really, really good. If you're not watching, it's on Mondays at 8 on CBS. The show is phenomenal. They're doing probably the best show. They're probably doing the best job of creating a superhero show. I mean, The Flash, don't get me wrong, The Flash is phenomenal. But I don't know, Supergirl just has that kind of campy feeling to it that we like out of our superheroes, Lyda and I. Not necessarily, everyone doesn't necessarily like that, but we like our superheroes campy to some degree. Not just so goofy that it's not enjoyable to watch, but not so hardcore that there's neck snapping going on. I always have to go back to that. But Supergirl, phenomenal episode. We found out several things this week. Number one, the biggest actually, because this has been the question that really has been on our minds since the beginning, is what actually happened between Hank Henshaw, Mr. Danvers, and Martian Manhunter all those years ago. They've told us before that, they've given us the setup, but they never went into great detail, and we never saw exactly what happened. So this week we go there. Jean's being basically interrogated. He's being held now, and he's being interrogated, and he just spills the beans about the whole thing and how it happened. And clearly, when you watch the episode, he really had nothing to do with it. He really had nothing to do with the death of either person. And so, what we saw was Mr. Danvers trying to protect Martian Manhunter. We see Hank Henshaw comes in, guns a-blazing, and he's wanting to kill him. The Danvers and Henshaw start fighting, which leads to Danvers getting stabbed and Henshaw being thrown off of a cliff. So Martian Manhunter really had nothing to do with either one dying. And then at that point, of course, he decided he was going to take on the form of Hank Henshaw to better protect the Danvers girls, which that seemed a little weird to me. I know they probably didn't mean for it to come off that way. There's more to it than just the split second that we saw, but I was kind of taken aback when it's like, hey, I met a Martian. It's been like 5 minutes of knowing him. Here's my daughters. Go find them and protect them. But obviously, Jean makes that kind of impression on people. So we find that out. We get to see in good detail what happened. They take us there in a flashback, and it's not one of those goofy flashbacks either. You actually see everything that happened. I was absolutely impressed. So we've got that happening. The next thing that big moment here that happens in this episode, and it happens later on in the show, but Silver Banshee's born. We got Silver Banshee in the mix now, and we've known for at least a couple episodes that she's there, but we weren't real sure how this was going to come about. And I don't know how much you guys know about Silver Banshee, so I'm going to talk a little bit about her. She's a real interesting character. I'm going to read you two versions of the character we're going to talk about two versions of the character because this version looks to me like she's coming from the New 52 story. But I'd also like to tell you a little Siobhan McDougal. She was the firstborn child of Garrett McDougal. He was the patriarch of an old Gaelic clan that has occupied an island midway between Scotland and Ireland for a thousand generations. That's a long time. On that island is Casti Browen, where firstborn McDougals undergo a ritual to prove themselves worthy to lead the clan. When Siobhan was young, she traveled the world, only returning to Castle Browen when she heard of her father's death. Her uncle Seamus determined that no woman would lead the clan and intended her brother Bevan to become the new patriarch. She went ahead with the family ritual by herself, which involved calling on supernatural forces of power. She was interrupted by Bevan, and the destruction proved disastrous as she was dragged away into an eternal netherworld. An entity called the Crone granted her powers and the ability to return to Earth as the Silver Banshee, but demanded payment in the form of an occult book that belonged to her father. She found her father's book collection had been shipped off for sale in the United States. Her quest brought her to Metropolis. Killing anyone that stood in the way of her search attracted the attention of Superman, who was able to defeat her when he realized she could only kill a person once. She can only kill a person once, so it's like double jeopardy with this girl. So basically what he did was he faked his own death, and he got Martian Manhunter to pose as his ghost, and then he was able to defeat her. So, but anyway, so that version drastically different than what we're going to see in the new one. Now, the new Silver Banshee from the New 52 shares the same name as the Silver Banshee in Supergirl, so that's why we kind of believe that this is going to be her backstory. In the 2011 reboot of DC's superhero continuity, the New 52, Siobhan Smythe first appeared in Supergirl Volume 6, Number 7, as a girl from Dublin who had immigrated to the United States to start a new life after her mother died and to escape her father, who was also dead Black Banshee. She befriends Supergirl and stood up to the National Guard, who tried to gun Supergirl down, as she could clearly see that Supergirl had saved the city from Kryptonian world killers, but is the only one who can speak her language. She invites Kara to live with her and brings her along to a cafe where she will perform music when her dead father, the Black Banshee, attacks, prompting her to transform into Silver Banshee. It says it's unclear at this time whether her alignment will remain good. So you can see that's a little bit closer. It's not the same, really, but it's a little bit closer. So she's good buddies with Supergirl. In that version anyway. So in this one, she obviously isn't good buddies with her. She kind of hates Kara anyway. In this episode, she tries to get Kara in trouble by using her computer to send messages over to Kat, nasty things about Kat, which Kat pretty much immediately knows Kara's not going to do. And so it went pretty bad for her. She ends up getting fired. And then, obviously she falls off the building and screams, and, that's how she finds out what's going on. Now, we don't know at this point if she had any understanding of this, or if she knew that she was going to be the Silver Banshee, or if she had any understanding of her family history. Her powers and abilities, typically, she has superhuman strength, agility, speed, endurance, and a high degree of resistance to physical and energy-based attacks. Her incredibly strong and destructive hypersonic walls, sonic screams, and sonic yells can kill anyone within a certain range, as long as she can see her victim and know their secret true name. Sparrowhawk. Victims are usually reduced to decimated husks. Silver Banshee is able to use her sonic-based abilities to teleport via sound waves. So, As Siobhan Smythe in the New 52 continuity, she has also exhibited a gift for language, becoming fluent after hearing merely a few words in not just humanoid languages, but also animal languages, as she shows off in one of the comics. So, yeah, just a little bit of information on the Silver Banshee and what we could see coming in the show. Now, I wonder in the show if they're going to make her look like a Banshee, because she does. We will find out. She's been on Smallville. She's been in Justice League Unlimited. And now, of course, live action in Supergirl. So that's that as far as she's concerned. Now we see the other thing that happened in this episode was Cadmus was mentioned, and that's a big nod to the comics. I mean, obviously, we're going to read a little bit about that in the hashtag DCTV Secrets. We'll get into some things in there as far as what'll happen, but anyone who's a Superboy fan knows that's how Superboy was created, was at Cadmus. They normally are involved with genetic testing and splicing and, you know, those types of things. The reason I don't want to go into it that much right now is just that it will be in the hashtag DCTV Secrets in great detail, so we'll get to that then. But Lucy is in charge now of the DEO, which is pretty cool. Most of the episode, I don't know if you guys got the same vibe or not, but through most of the episode, I felt like Lucy was going to end up being bad. You know, it just seemed like she didn't like Supergirl. She didn't trust Martian Manhunter. She was going down the road to flip into the dark side, and then things changed. Kara told her secret. Is that the key? Right? The question arose many times in Smallville was, would Lex have been Superman's enemy had he told him the secret? You know, had he come out and said, from getting that, I'm this Kryptonian that's been saving all these people, would Lex Luthor have still turned against him? And so we get to see the flip side of that in this show, is Lucy was darn near turning against Supergirl. In fact, I'd say she had. And then she finds out the secret. She's let into the loop. And things change. Her mind's open and she sees things from all perspectives. So, do they make their own villains? Only time will tell, because we still have to wonder if Lucy's going to end up being Superwoman in this show. She very well could, still. But at this point anyway, she's on Team Supergirl. Colonel James Harper shows up in this episode. I know that a lot of people out there, or some people out there, would have recognized that name as Guardian from the comics. We're going to talk a little bit about the version of Guardian from the comics. Drastically different from this version. I'm not sure I like this guy. I get the sense that he's a good guy and that he's, you know, his intentions are good, but he's just so ruthless about it that it just makes me not like him. He's just, you know, he doesn't seem to be listening to reason. He seems to have already made up his mind, and that could be because he knows more than we do at this point about what's going on, but we find out something else shortly after he's introduced that makes us think he's just a bad guy. So we'll get to that. But first, let's talk about the good guy. And I swear this character was on Smallville too. It's not listed as that, but I could swear that he was. But anyway, Jim Harper was a police officer in Metropolis's suicide slum who became a vigilante to catch crooks that the law could not prosecute, describing himself as guarding society from criminals. He was trained to fighting conditions, trained by Joe Morgan, the same man who trained two other mystery men, Wildcat and the First Adam. So he was trained by the same dude who trained Wildcat, and Wildcat trained most of the heroes. So he was aided by a group of boys known as the Newsboy Legion, to whom he was literally a guardian, having volunteered to take them in rather than allowing them to be sent to prison. And that's interesting because the Newsboys, we're going to find out something interesting about them here in just a little bit, and that could actually be how Guardians tied into this. and this is pretty interesting too, the Legion grew up to become the heads of the Cadmus Project. So that's exactly what we were just thinking, is that's how it's going to tie in. Subsequently, they saved Harper's life by transferring his mind from his old dying body into a younger clone of himself. It was later revealed that Jim Harper was the great uncle of Roy Harper, who became Green Arrow's sidekick under the name of Speedy. So that there again could be a tie-in to Arrow. We know we're going to see Flash crossing over, I believe, next week, and so there we have a tie-in to, Arrow as well. So I don't know how they're going to make that crossover happen. We'll see, but I really hope they work that angle in there, that he's Roy's great uncle. Dun, 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 dun. Following Infinite Crisis, the Guardian clone's backstory was retconned. Jim Harper was not killed in the line of duty, but shot by Cadmus. First head of security Jonathan Drew, upon discovering the clone was already being created. It was also revealed that the original Guardian clone had left Cadmus early on and was now living in the town of Warpath on the Mexican border. So none of this really seems close at all to what they're doing on Supergirl, and I'm very interested to find out. I mean, in most places that I've seen Guardian, he's been a pretty true blue guy. In fact, he was created by Jack Kirby and Joe Simon, the same folks who created Captain America for Marvel. And so there's been a lot of comparisons over the years to Guardian and Captain America. Basically, carries an indestructible shield, kind of a thing. Very similar costumes. But in most incarnations that I've seen him, he's been a pretty true blue guy. And what we find out next leads me in the opposite direction. So they talk about Cadmus, and at some point in here, Martian Manhunter is trying to erase Harper's memory of this most recent event, and he finds out that Danvers is still alive. He sees visions of him in Cadmus, and so now the Danvers girls are freaking out because their dad's still alive, or they think that he's still alive. Harper's known that the entire time. So who is this guy? What is he, what's his ulterior motive here? And why keep that? Why are they keeping that? What are they doing to Danvers? It's freaky. I don't know, but we'll find out. So that's where they it's not really left there, but now that everything's blown up, Lucy's in charge of Lucy's in charge of the DEO. Alex and John are on the run because they had to break John out. That's the only thing that could happen, because they were taking Alex and John to Cadmus to experiment on them, I'm assuming. So now they're on the run. John and Alex. Could be a new show. Could be like a buddy comedy. I don't know. But they are going to go find Danvers. That's what's happening now. So they're heading to Cadmus to find Danvers. And I want to talk about this now, so I'm going to flip to the DC TV secrets for Supergirl, because I want to get into this about Cadmus, because this is why now I'm thinking that Superboy may show up on this show. I don't know, but they could definitely bring him in. And that excites me to no end, because I would love to see Superboy on the show. We may or may not. They're talking a lot about Clark now. They're calling him Clark. We may end up seeing Superman, but they may skip that altogether, and they may just throw in Superboy, because now we've got Alex and Jean going to Cadmus to find Danvers. What else are they going to find there, is my question. So, if you go to DCComics.com and check out the hashtag DCTV Secrets for Supergirl, episode 17 titled Manhunter, and they've also talked about James Harper. Who is James Harper? Colonel James Harper is nothing but harsh to Jean and Kara, Alex, and anyone else who gets in his way. That was not the case in the comics, though. Jim Harper was introduced in Star Spangled Comics number 7. He was a police officer turned vigilante and became known as Guardian. A clone of Harper eventually served as head of security for Project Cadmus. The next one, it's all in the DNA. Harper plans to take Jean and Alex to Project Cadmus, a genetic engineering facility that uses alien DNA for military purposes. The program has a long history in the comics, with its debut occurring in Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen number 133. Project Cadmus was initially known as the DNA Project and run by the Newsboy Legion. Their primary objectives involved cloning experiments and genetic engineering. Project Cadmus even created a Superboy clone using the genetic material of Lex Luthor and Superman. Well, eventually they did. Story of Superboy and the way that it was clear up until Crisis on Infinite Earths. After Crisis on Infinite Earths, sometime after that, when the new Teen Titans came out, they retconned the story. So in that version, the retcon version, yes, he is a clone of Lex Luthor and Superman. But in the original version, and I kind of liked it better, not because, well, I don't know which one I like better. I like them both the same, because Connor's my favorite out of all of them. He's the one I relate to the most, and always has been. At first, Con-El, or just plain Superboy. But the reason I like the original Superboy is because it sticks more with what I would consider reality. Even though we're talking about a comic book here where a guy can fly and is from another planet, I feel like that story is more real than the new one, simply because of this. So when Superboy was first introduced, the Cadmus wanted to have a clone of Superman. They wanted to have their own Superman. In the event that something would happen to Superman, there would be another to take his place. Or in the event that he went rogue, they'd have someone there to step in. And so the original thought was to use Superman's DNA. Well, they couldn't, because Superman had an impenetrable skin. At this point in the comics, this was when Superman was just uber godly strong, and so there was absolutely no way that they could figure out to get a sample of Superman's DNA. So what they had to do was they had to create a clone, a human clone, and artificially replicate Superman's powers. So they created the clone, and at that time all we really knew was that it was from donors with like similar looks to Superman, and they manufactured the powers basically to make them close to Superman. So Superman could fly, okay, for example. Superboy couldn't necessarily fly the same way. He had tactile telekinesis, so he could move objects with his mind to some degree, and that's what he did with to fly. And the same thing with his strength. He wasn't really super strong, but he would use his tactile telekinesis to help himself along with it and move objects partially with his strength and partially with his mind, and that is basically how they made it look like he was strong. So he didn't have some of the abilities that Superman had. He didn't have heat vision at the time. And so he was basically as close to Superman as they could get by replicating these powers. And I always thought that was kind of cool because, number one, outside of a kryptonite needle, which in my opinion, if you look at how kryptonite worked back then, it probably would have really just killed Superman. But short of having some kind of a kryptonite needle, there's no way to extract DNA from Superman. You can't just, it's not like in the movie where they plucked his hair. You wouldn't be able to pluck his hair. And so that, they addressed that, and I've always thought that was cool. They addressed the fact that there would be no way to pull this DNA from Superman, and the only way to get it done would be to biogenetically engineer a clone, or, a quote-unquote clone, to have those powers, but to do it in a different way. And I've really, really always liked that. But then when the new Teen Titans came out, they retconned it, and they basically said, and they did it in a really cool way too, they said that, as time went on, basically Connor found out that story was baloney. So basically, that's the story that was told, but later on, Connor finds out it was baloney, that the human that they used, the human DNA that they used came from Lex Luthor, and that they did in fact splice it with Superman's DNA. So he was part Lex Luthor and he was part Superman, which is also very, very cool. I really also love that version of the character, but see, that version of the character has Kryptonian DNA. And so the way that they explained how those powers hadn't manifested yet was just that. They just hadn't manifested yet. And so eventually he got more and more powerful. So there's a lot of different versions of Superboy out there. And I'm very interested to see which one they would go with if they brought him in to Supergirl. We know in what we saw in Smallville with Connor was very similar to the Superman and Lex Luthor clone. In fact, that's what it was. He was part of each. But at first, he had been looked like he was all Lex. And then as he aged, he grew into his powers. And so that was pretty cool. And we'll just see if it'd be awesome if he would show up on Supergirl now. And we'd get little Connor Kent coming in. That would be tight. But we'll see. I don't know. It definitely could happen. But move on to Flash, because we've talked about Supergirl for way too long. In this week's Flash, basically things that we already knew got told to the cast. There is yet another speedster. So there's a new criminal speedster running around. It took them a little while to figure it out, but it is a girl. And she is stirring stuff up. She's using her powers in such a way that she's hurting things. She's robbing people. She's making Flash have a bad name, because all you can see is the lightning bolt. No one can tell that it's either Flash or who it would be, but they're all going to assume that it's Flash. And so everyone starts turning on him a little bit, and he's got to somehow prove that it's not him, which he ends up doing. But we're going to go into how she got her powers. It was pretty obvious to me from the start that it was V9, the drug that Caitlin made to try to give Jay his speed back. It was pretty obvious to me right away that that's what it was, especially when she started talking about the fact that she had sent it off to Mercury Labs, and that someone there had basically the whole formula, but not all of it, the Eliza Harmon character. So right off the bat, when you see her, you know that that's who it is, and it ends up being her. But she has taken the V9. She's taken a different version of it because she didn't have the whole formula. So basically, she back-engineered what she had and came up with her own little version of it. And what we find out that's interesting about V9 in this episode that we didn't really know before was that it kind of creates I'm going to say multiple personality It kind of splits her personality. So the part of her that is wholly addicted to this V9 and pretty much needs it and wants it is now talking to her. And we can see how that could have potentially helped form Zoom. So now when you see that, if you haven't watched the episode yet, pay really close attention, because the part of her that really wants this V9 seems pretty evil, and seems like that they can take control. And if that very same thing happened with Jay, then there could be another theory as to how Zoom was formed. This entire time I've thought that it was Hunter Zolomon, the Earth 1 version of Jay, and sometime later in his life he becomes Zoom, and we talked about this in great detail in one of the other shows. Now I have to wonder if somehow that V9 created multiple personalities in Jay, and they were actually split into two separate beings somehow. And that very well could be. I don't know. I kind of don't like that as well as the other theory, but we'll see. But yeah, so we've got, let's see. Jessie finds out the true nature about her dad in this episode. I can't really say anything about that because I feel like I would be exactly the same way. Basically, Jesse hears a recording that her dad had made talking about what he would do to protect her or what he would do to get her back. And basically, he'd cross every line. He'd kill for her. And she doesn't like that because she thinks that that makes him a bad dude. Personally, I don't know, you know, I don't know what to say about that because I feel like so Jessie decides she's going to go out on her own and get some life experience. So she takes off. We'll probably see Jessie back at some point, maybe as a speedster, I hope. But that brings us to pretty much the big point of this episode that was kind of being flashed at us throughout the episode. Throughout the whole episode, Cisco keeps vibing and he keeps seeing Zoom. And he doesn't really know why, and then he figures out at some point it's happening every time he's near Jay's helmet. So Barry pops the helmet out of the glass case, Cisco grabs a hold of it, and he vibes Zoom. He sees Zoom take off his mask, and he sees who he thinks is Jay Garrick. And so now everyone is in shock because they think Jay is Zoom, which he is in a sense, but I just don't think it's the original Jay. But now they think they've been had. And here we have Barry again with a mentor who's turned on him or who was never on his side to begin with, he thinks. So now we get more trust issues out of Barry. Trajectory was the name of the villain in this. She ends up kind of fading in. Well, it looks like she fades into the Speed Force. But she burns up. I mean, she runs so fast. She's going way faster than Barry at this point, and she runs so fast that she just disintegrates. And so I'm thinking this is how they're teaching us about how the Speed Force works. You go too fast, you go into the Speed Force. The same thing will eventually happen to Barry. So we'll see if that pans out the same way that it did in the comics. Hashtag DC TV secrets for this week on Flash. Again, on DCComics.com. The Flash has been known by several nicknames over the years in the comics, but Scarlet Speedster is perhaps the most popular. Iris's boss at Central City Picture News, Scott Evans, was the latest to use that nickname for the Flash in this episode, which that's not really a secret. If you've been watching the show this far along, they've said Scarlet. I thought they'd said Scarlet Speedster before. The next one, being fast isn't everything. Like Cisco says, we finally have a lady speedster on the Flash. Elizabeth Harmon took Velocity 9 and became the fast-running Trajectory. Harmon gained her super speed in a different way in the comics, first appearing in 52 number 17. Harmon transferred due to Lex Luthor's Everyman Project. She could only slow down her superhuman speed by taking a drug called Sharp. So she had the opposite problem. She was too fast, and she needed to take a drug to slow down. Very interesting. And the reason I say that is because now we're moving over to Gotham. And last week, I don't know if you remember, but before I started talking about the DC TV and Friday's show last week, I guess it was Monday's show, before we watched these wonderful DC TV shows, I was talking about the new movie on Netflix, Pee-wee's Big Holiday. Well, that very night, immediately after the show is over, we start watching Gotham, and guess who's on Gotham but Paul Reubens? And so Pee-wee is on Gotham. That's phenomenal. It couldn't be better timing. And I'm telling you, the guy is he's a great actor anyway. I've always thought so. But he's great at changing roles, and so it's almost unrecognizable in this. But he's playing none other than Penguin's dad. But we'll get to that. So in this episode tonight of Gotham this week, we saw Enigma acting very much like the Riddler. He's got it in for Gordon. He's doing everything that he can to mess with him to the point where he gets Gordon arrested. And so now we've got Jim Gordon going to jail. I just don't know if I like where it's going with Jim. He's already crossed too many lines. I mean, it's not the Gordon that I think of when I think of Jim Gordon. It was in the beginning, but now he's just crossed too many lines. He's not the stand-up guy that I want him to be. Maybe he's going to get back to that. I don't know, but it just seems to keep going in the opposite direction. And going to jail is not going to help that. I don't know how that's going to work out, but it's not looking good for Jim Gordon at this point. So Bruce gets in a fight this week for the first time. It's not really the first time, but he gets bloodied. So the last episode we saw, Bruce he's trying to learn more about the world. He's trying to figure out how the mind of a criminal works. He realizes that he can never understand this by living the privileged life that he lives. So he's gone out on his own, living with Kat on the street to get an experience for the real world. And so that experience needs money to survive, but he doesn't want to survive off of his millions or billions of dollars or whatever. He wants to get money the hard way, which in this case happens to be stealing from drug dealers who are cultivating happy mushrooms. And actually Ivy's the one doing it. So we see a young Ivy who's making these party shrooms, and so they devise this little plan to steal the money. Of course, they get caught, and, well, not of course, but they get caught, and Bruce has to stand up to the leader of this quote-unquote gang. And he remembers from the last episode, that Gordon had taught him how to fight a big guy, to just wear him out, let him beat on you for a little while, and then wear him out. And so he uses that technique, and it works out for him. But we get to see a lot out of Bruce. We get to see the fire in his eyes. We get to see the Bruce Wayne looks. And we start to see that this young Batman is emerging. The only thing that bothers me a little bit is that, he's like 10. I don't know how old he is, but, this is pretty young for him to be out there starting down this path. But they got to get there quick. The Riddler's already been made. So is the Penguin. I mean, we're going to have like a 15-year-old Batman at this point in order for things to fall in line. Unless these villains are just going to run, free for the next 15 years. I don't know. So I really am interested to see how Gotham works into this whole, if they are part of the same reality as Supergirl and Flash, or what the deal is with that. I've always thought that it's going to be, obviously this is happening in a past, so it's not in the same timeline as Supergirl and Flash, but the question that I'll have is it even in the same reality? Because a lot of things in Gotham are, different than what we expect them to be. Not that they're bad in any way. I personally, I can dig the fact that Kat and Bruce are hanging out together. It kind of adds an element to me that I thought that probably should have been there to begin with. But at this point, he's hanging out with Kat and Ivy. How are they not going to know he's Batman when he comes back and he's doing, he's having these conversations with them? I know he's wearing a mask, but, I don't know. We'll see. It just, it's different. That's all. Still very enjoyable. There were no hashtag DC TV secrets on the website this week for Gotham, so I've got nothing really to go over as far as the secrets are concerned. We did see, I almost forgot to talk about it in detail, but so I said that Paul Reubens was Penguin's dad. So Penguin gets this is a horrible this has been a horrible experience for Penguin. He's been in Arkham. He's been basically being tortured. Hugo's, they want to call it what you will, but Hugo Strange is torturing people in there. And so they think that he thinks that he's reformed, and he goes back out into the world, and he's going to make things right, and he's going to do things the right way. And so he starts by apologizing to Butch, which ends up getting him tarred and feathered. He heads on over to Nigma's house, ends up realizing that Nigma's just a maniac, and he doesn't want to be any part of that, what's going on there. So he goes to his mom's grave, and he's standing there having a moment, and a man's there also having a moment. Man turns out to be his dad, who's Paul Reubens. Turns out that Paul Reubens has a family. They take Penguin back to the house and bring him into the family in a very creepy and weird way. The whole setting was just a creep fest. So I have to believe that something bad is about to happen to Penguin. I feel like this is a setup for him somehow, and this is going to end up, he's going to end up he's going to be genuine. They're going to wrong him in some way. He may end up killing them, I don't know, and then he's going to be back down his good old path of evil. No idea if that's the case, but obviously Penguin's not a good guy in the comics, so we're going to have something happen here to push him back down the path. So that's kind of my theory as to where that's going. Gotham again, Mondays at 8, same time as Supergirl, different channel. It's on Fox, and so you can catch that as well. And I don't know, we tend to do Supergirl first and then go back and watch Gotham online after the fact, but to each their own. Now tonight I have got to catch up on Arrow. If you've already seen Arrow, I'll be talking about Arrow and this week's Legends of Tomorrow on the next show, which will be the Friday wrap-up. And that, like I told you, Man of Steel's the next day. That's a huge priority for me. So over to DCComics.com, like we do at the end or towards the end of every show. We'll check out the pull list for this week, which is Batman number 50, Wonder Woman number 50, and Batman Volume 8 Super Heavy, which are all available now. I encourage you to go to DCComics.com, check out some of the stuff that they've got. And if you have not done this yet, you need to download the DC All Access app. It's a free download for either Android or Apple. You can go to the iTunes store, download it there. Android, I don't know what you guys do, but it's a free download, and that app is phenomenal. There is all kinds of information on there. You could fuel your own talk show with it. And but no, the more people that download it, the better. So I definitely encourage you to go and do that. And join us again Friday night. We'll be on late Friday. We may do some streaming tomorrow of just some regular gameplay, but we will be on late tomorrow. Let us know what you think about DC TV, DC Comics, and DCUO in the comments of this video. It'll be up on YouTube. You can watch the whole show in about another hour. It should be up there, and then I'll do the edited version with probably tomorrow. And there's really no difference other than the edited version has my intro, and I really like showing off that intro. But thank you guys for joining us this week, or this show. Thanks for joining us each and every time. If you can, share and like the video. We've gained a number of subscribers this week, so thank you guys. I think we're up to 145 or over at this point, and thank you to each and every one of you. You guys are why we do it. So if you're not subscribed already, it's a great way to get updates or alerts as to when we go live, and you can watch it that way. So again, this is DCU Tonight for Hippolyta Kent. This is Rockvar saying peace out.